as we commemorate this special occasion in the life of our school. Today, we are specially honored by the presence of our distinguished chief guest, Professor Amitabh Kundu, Distinguished Fellow at Research and Information Systems, New Delhi, and former Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. I extend a warm welcome to the respected Vice Chancellor of our university, Professor B.J. Rao, Amitabh Kundu, our chief guest, along with our respected Dean of the School of Economics, Professor R. Vijay. May I request them to kindly come to the dais and grace the occasion. I would also like to invite my friends to present saplings as a token of our gratitude to our esteemed chief guest. Now I request our Vice Chancellor, Professor B.J. Rao, to chair the session.
It's a real special pleasure for me to um, have Professor Amitabh Kunduji sitting next to me. You have been a source of inspiration for us, for in general in the entire academic system. And your title of today's talk also is fairly pointed. I'm sure there will be very interesting take homes for all of us to grab. And I have one request for you. And the request is I want you to interact with all my young scholars even after your lecture. Let them pose you some tough questions related to this topic and in and around this topic. And I want to please them with your knowledge. This is a special request. Try to see if you can accommodate that. Yeah. This is a very dynamic day for me. I'm running between different pillars and posts. So I'm here only for a brief while. Um, I will not be able to sit through your talk, sir. Sorry. This is my loss. Yeah. But sometimes there are many other things to do. Yeah. So, as per this, now we have welcome remarks by Devashish Acharya. Hello, hello, Constance. Introduction to the speaker, please. Hello.
Good morning to all of you. Warm greetings to everyone on the Foundation Day of the School of Economics. It's both my great honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished chief guest for today's celebration, Professor Amitabh Kundu. Professor Kundu is currently Distinguished Fellow at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi. He is an eminent economist whose remarkable career spans academia, research, and policy making. Among his many prestigious roles, he has served as the Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Kundu is also chairing the committee of overseeing the survey for the Swachh Bharat Mission Rural. In addition, he has been a regional advisor on poverty at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Western Asia, Beirut, and consultant to the government of Sri Lanka. Professor Kundu's global engagement, including being the chairperson of the post-structure evaluation committee set up by the Ministry of Minority Affairs, and serving as a visiting professor at renowned institutes such as University of Amsterdam, Sciences Po, and Maison des Sciences in Paris, as well as universities in Germany like Weserberg. Throughout his illustrious career, Professor Kundu has made significant contributions to the field of urban development, migration, and regional disparities, with a particular focus on addressing socioeconomic inequalities and promoting inclusive growth. His expertise is highly valued by the national and international organizations, including United Nations, where he has chaired key committees on the global development challenges. His groundbreaking work in shaping public policy, especially in urbanization, housing, and poverty alleviation, has had a lasting impact. His research, publication, and policy insights have guided governments and development agencies in tackling some of the most critical issues in both urban and rural India. We are truly honored to have Professor Kundu with us today. I'm certain that his vast experience and expertise will enrich us all. Thank you.
So now I request Dr. Devaki Chancellor to the welcome remarks.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor J Rao Garu, Professor Amitabh Kundu, the distinguished speaker of the day, Dean Professor Vijay, my colleagues, dignitaries, and my dear students. On behalf of the school, I extend a hearty welcome to Professor Amitabh Kundu, who kindly consented to be our distinguished speaker today on the Foundation Day and to deliver his address on the Foundation Day lecture. So I think I was supposed to talk about a bit school, mostly for the benefit of Professor Kundu. We were one of the schools from the day of, uh, the university was founded in 70s and School of Economics was a department then. And the department was elevated to a school in 2012. And we have three programs, integrated masters, which is a 5 years program with exits at different points of time. And then we have MA Economics and MA Financial Economics. Two more programs. We have about 300 students in the school. Other than that, we have a significant number of PhD scholars. And the programs are well balanced in terms of theory, tools, empirics, and applications. And one good thing about the school is in 2024, we were placed in 501, 550 band of the QS World Subject Rankings. And our major strength is our students who are here. Anywhere you go, whether it's an academic institution or an industry or a corporate body, you will find a student of School of Economics there. So we have a strong alumni base. The students have been going to both centrally funded higher education institutions, both for their PhD, including our own school, and also they are placed in these HEIs, including IITs, IIMs, and you will also find them in the regulatory bodies like SEBI, PFRDA, NAPFID, Reserve Bank of India, to just name a few. Uh, so this is about all about our school, and so let me again welcome Professor Amitabh Kundu on behalf of the school on this Foundation Day. Thank you very much.
I'll just make few remarks and formally welcome Professor Kundu for his lecture. And after that, I'll have to run away for my other ritual. The topic for Professor Kundu's talk is fairly pointed. Emerging global scenario of resource use and unequal environmental burden areas of concern. Actually, the title gives it away for anyone to understand. The origin of the title is actually much more interesting. How did we get there? How did this whole thing become unequal? How unequal it is? And what is the future impact? And it has to do with environmental burden. Only one point I want to sort of emphasize here before I leave. And the point is the causative elements of this inequality in terms of, let us say, per capita carbon footprint or any such thing. If you map globally, the causative per capita carbon footprint causing nations, you will see certain pattern. Generally, developed nations light it because they are the causative elements, extremely well mapped. There is another map which is also more interesting, and that map is vulnerability map. the map that actually maps all the nations which are vulnerable to this environmental damage, quote unquote. Interestingly, the vulnerability map is exactly complementary to the causative map. So that means the countries which have already caused the damage are still causing, and the countries which have become vulnerable to this environmental fragility are becoming more and more vulnerable. I am sure Kunduji will explain this. And this vulnerability increasing more and more, becoming more acute, is the cause of this inequality. And this inequality is actually becoming more acute. And this is a very important challenge in many ways. And all of us have to understand what are the actual drivers of this inequality and how do we start undoing it, what is individual nations responsibility, etc. That is the future discourse, and India is doing fairly well in this future discourse because we have committed ourselves that we will become carbon neutral in certain number of years, and we are ahead of in that curve as of now. And as I speak now, the uh, the non-renewable energy contribution in our energy basket is almost about 40%. And this will likely to be increasing very rapidly. And that is a good news because unless we increase that basket very rapidly, we will not be able to reduce our carbon footprint. So all of us are gearing up towards that. And I'm sure Professor Amitabh Kunduji will also touch upon our current efforts in that direction. And all of us have to really be part of that particular process. It's a very interesting contemporary area, and I'm sure interesting discussion will happen in this presentation. I formally welcome Professor Kunduji to this seminar and to this campus, and I'm sure my young scholars will get enormously benefited by his scholarship. Thank you very much. Namaste.
I request Professor Amitabh Kundu to come up and make his presentation further. Titled Global Economic Scenario of Resource Use and Unequal Environmental Burden Area of Concern. All yours, sir.
I must thank Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Rao, for taking time out of the busy schedule and start this function. Professor Vijay, Professor Acharya, other senior colleagues, young colleague and friend Alok Mishra, young students. I was really privileged to be at the School of Economics at the Central University of Hyderabad. Before many of you had joined, long time back when Professor Radhakrishna was the head of the department here. I spent about 4 or 5 days, and subsequently I've been coming to different departments. I've been a vagabond in in social sciences, sometimes from demography to geography to environmental sciences. But certainly it's a great honor and privilege for me to be part of this Golden Jubilee celebrations and part of this Foundation Day lecture. As Vice Chancellor Rao pointed out, that the title gives out more or less everything, the basic concerns that I have. I hope I'm audible at the end, right? But I would leave the PPT here and you would be in a position to get, I mean, anybody who's not attending, but if you go through the slides systematically, you wouldn't miss much. Friends, let me begin by making this provocative statement that until about a decade and a half, environmental economics was more part of faith, part of assertions, ethical statements, political bargaining, and ideological debates, and not much of rigorous empirical work was being done. And I don't really blame the environmental economists for that, because the parameters with which we have to deal with in this area are futuristic. Technology is changing, this governance system is changing. So many of the projections would go haywire if certain sudden developments come in. I remember Kirit Bhai Parikh, who's an energy specialist, told me before about a couple of years that this renewable energy, solar energy, it looks cheaper by the current cost, but if you take the fixed cost altogether, it's not really very cheap. That statement he made before about 2.5 years. But within 3 months, I met him again, and he said, Amitabh, I'm revising my position. I think the development in solar energy, particularly saving the solar energy, storing the solar energy is a problem because you can get sunlight at one point of time and you need electricity at some other point of time. So the technology is changing so fast. I'm revising my opinion. So I'm really not blaming lack of some kind of a rigor in the environmental economics and people being carried away by ideological commitments, which is understandable. But I think from 2005 onwards, for the last 15, 20 years, there has been considerable amount of data which had been brought in. UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, has a panel, International Resource Panel. They're giving robust, reliable, and temporally comparable data for 200 countries on several environmental parameters like material footprint, like domestic material consumption, efficiency of resource use. You know, you have all that data systematically coming out every year for 200 countries, 200 plus countries from 1970 onwards. And I was talking to one of the members of the International Resource Panel. He said, we give data up to 2024. He said that before about a year. I said, well, are you able to give? He said, our projections are as good as reality because our modeling is so strong that don't worry. Although actual data is for 2019, all our projections, but the projections are pretty close to reality. So I was very impressed by his confidence. Perhaps a bit of it comes from the allegiance to the institute that he belongs to. But nonetheless, things are changing. And this International Resource Panel has sponsored a number of research studies globally. One of the major studies they have given to development alternatives that's based in Delhi. And the task that has been given to development alternatives is to tell that how this increase in the material consumption of resources which has taken place from 1970 onwards, significant growth rate of 2.3% every year. And if that continues, we're certainly going to have the global temperature rise by 2 degrees Celsius. Now, that data is available, and that growth rate, as I said, 2.3%, is much higher than the population growth rate. Population growth rate currently is less than 1%. Overall economic growth is also 2.3, 2.5%. Globally, the growth rate is not in the realm of 5%. So certainly it's a matter of anxiety and concern. And what International Resource Panel, IRP, wants different countries, different regions to do, and this is a global project in development alternatives, that their efforts to improve the resource efficiency. There are efforts to bring in circular economy. You know what circular economy? Once you take the resources, there's a 1 ton of resources combining, there is some way of aggregating the different resources. You get some value. You produce a machinery, and that machinery goes out of use after 2.5 years. You throw it away. That is not circularity. Circularity means once you have used it, it could be repaired if possible. It can be improved. It can be used for some other production, so that that resource remains in circulation throughout its lifetime, and the lifetime can be expanded. So basically, circular economy aims at zero emission ideally, but that is what the UNEP, United Nations Environment Program, is interested in knowing, that there are efforts globally to improve the resource efficiency so that we can get much more out of 1 ton of material resources that you're extracting from the Mother Earth. At the moment, you're getting a value, maximum value is from the developed countries $1.5 per kilogram of materials. There are some composite value. It is to go up to at least $3 or $4. But one concern is these measures of improving resource efficiency is very unequal. It is increasing the resource efficiency in Europe and United States much faster. And it is not really improving the well-being of the vulnerable population that Professor Rao was mentioning. So it is increasing inequality. So resource efficiency is not the only concern that we should have. We should also find out the measures of resource efficiency improvement which are being initiated globally. Are they giving benefits to the poorer sections in the less developed regions? Are the poor in India going to benefit from these measures of improving resource efficiency? At the moment, concern is, look, resources should be used maximally. We should get maximum out of these resources through this circular economy, use, reuse, repair. And there are innovations which are improving the resource efficiency. But the impact on equality, equity, these are the areas of concern that we are looking at. And I thought I'll present some of the results from this study, which is not yet, it's ongoing research project. So instead of talking about ethics, norms, and political exhortations, what third world countries should do, what is the responsibility of the global institutions and the developed countries, instead of making such statements, which are, of course, part of our rhetoric, look at some of the data carefully and see how much weight can you give to those demands from the developed countries and the developing countries, which they are taking. They have very fixed positions. I have seen in the global platform, the developing countries are unanimous on what the problem is, who should bear the responsibility. And similarly, the developed countries also are very firm in there. So there is complete disagreement. So I thought I'll start from that and give you some of the results. One, what is the position in the less developed countries? I can take this chair for some time and sit down. And literally I can make it. Take a moment. Sit down. I'm here. Right, thank you. So if you ask what is the position of the developing countries, less developed countries, including India, China, Brazil, Indonesia, the position is that, look, we are not responsible for growth. We are not responsible for the greenhouse gases which come up. It is after the Industrial Revolution, Europe and bit of North America benefited with along with industrialization without caring for environment, without caring for reckless use of resources. And that's why they're responsible. So we are not responsible for global warming. Our part is one, sharing it. Whatever happens on one side of the boat, the other side is also going to sink. But then the responsibility of taking care of the problems of sustainability is with the global institution that falls largely on the developed countries, and they should take the measures. They should try to improve the resource efficiency of the less developed countries. They should help in transferring the technology free of cost, compensate for the damage which has been done. And that is the position which has been taken the last 30 years. You remember Mrs. Gandhi also took that position, and I don't think if on anything there is no disagreement between Mrs. Gandhi and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on this. That when the responsibility certainly is of the developed world, and we are not responsible for it. What is the position of the developed countries? I think that can be best summarized by a question which was asked to me by a young lady in Würzburg, the university where I was teaching for about a year. This lady stands up and said, Professor, tell me, how are you blaming my great great grandfather for global warming? He or she had no idea of what global warming is. They have no idea that what greenhouse gases could do. They are unaware. If it is a sin or a crime, they didn't even know about it. Now nobody knew about it. And now you are blaming my great grandfather, saying that you did it. It was not a crime. Number one. And then she says, even if you, by some strange logic, hold my grandfather responsible, how am I responsible? Why do you want my generation to compensate? You know what international law you can bring in to pressurize the developed countries for taking care of the people. That is the kind of position, and I really find no way by which we can reconcile these two positions. I was attending a meeting in Singapore. There was a reasonable person. He said, okay, Professor Kundu, we agree that India is a poor country. So India should have some concessions. There should be no ceiling and no constraint, no binding that you cannot increase your resource use because you have to meet other sustainable development goals, poverty, educational deficit, health deficit. So perhaps the constraint that we are imposing on the developed countries should not be applied. India should, and the developing countries should be free. But he asked that why a rich person in India who is getting $40,000 per year per person should be different from a person in New York or in Geneva or in Rio de Janeiro who is getting 40,000. They should be treated similarly. The poor in India could be treated different, but a rich person in India should be facing the similar kind of a taxation system, similar kind of incentive as in Europe or in Latin America. This is the kind of position this gentleman was taking. And I thought, and everybody said, yes, this seems reasonable. But if you accept that, what does it mean? Yes, we will allow India some relaxation in the environmental fronts, provided your taxation policy in India is decided in Paris. No country can allow the taxation policy, income tax policy, incentive policy to be decided. He said, yes, we agree that we are an unequal society. But it is our decision. We cannot allow, Geneva to decide what should the taxation rate, right? So I tried to argue that yes, your concern is right. It's true that increase in the number of millionaires in India, the rate of increase in the number of millionaires in India is higher than the rate of reduction in poverty. So we have every year more millionaires coming up. I agree that it's an unequal society, but the burden of designing the appropriate policies of taxation belongs to us. And not, we don't want to give up our sovereignty, saying that, okay, we will have the relaxations on environment, provided our taxation policy is decided globally. Nobody will accept that. So let me start by showing you some switches based on the data. As I mentioned, International Resource Panel has brought out, and it is available globally. I am just working on this for the last 3, 4 months. And some of the interesting insight that I get, I want to share with you. Can we have the first slide, please? This is the material footprint across major regions of the world, commonly used, this is I have added, to malign Asia. Look at this. We're asking, what are the countries which are responsible for maximum use of material resources? Who are using material resources more? Is it Asia or is it Europe? Is it Latin America, Africa, or North America? Which country? We generally feel that much of the environmental burden now, much of the material use, which includes biodiversity, which includes industrial raw materials, much of the use is by the developed countries, which is not true. This is the kind of graph which is being shown in the global platform to say, hey, look at this. Who are the major polluters? This is the global growth in material consumption. How much was it? It is something like 38 billion tons. 38 billion tons was the total material use in 1980. You know, easily. 1980, 38 billion. And what is the figure now? 2000, as I said, figures are available for 2024, which is a projection. Right to 2022, which is more robust. It is 102 billion tons. 38 going to 102, and a significant increase. And frankly, the rate of growth in material consumption is 2.3% per year, which is more or less similar to that of income growth rate, which means there is no decoupling of resource use from income growth. If income is growing by 2.5%, your resource use is also going increasing by 2.5%, which is risky. There should be decoupling. Decoupling means your economic growth must be at least higher than the growth in resource consumption. Your resource consumption, if your overall growth rate, global growth rate is 2.5%, we would expect the resources growth should go down to 1% at least. That's not what is not happening. But which region is this? The highest. This is Asia. Asia and Pacific. Do you know what percentage of the total material use is coming from Asia and Pacific? Of course, all the countries in Asia Pacific are not really poor, but the total contribution of Asia Pacific is 55%. And all the other are flat, more or less. This is United States of America, which went up. You see the blue one? But you must say, oh, it's a very small. So Europe, the share is something like 5, 6, 7%. But it increased up to 2000, 2001. After that, it came down a little bit. In Europe also it came down, but again it is showing some increase in resource consumption as far as the developed countries are concerned. But the total contribution of Asia Pacific in the incremental, let me repeat again, the share of Asia Pacific in the incremental material consumption was 85% of all the Sorry, this is not Asia Pacific only, it is all the developing regions. Asia Pacific share is 55%. This is 55% of the total. Africa, another 10%, add it up. And during 2000 and 2010, the share of the developing countries in the total incremental material consumption was 92%. It increased. The share of the developing world in the material consumption, it went up from 85 to 92%. Again, this has come down. As you say that for America, it has slightly gone up. Since the scale is big, you don't see the differences. In the next graph, you will see that. But this is the graph which is projected by the developed countries saying, look, who is responsible? Asia Pacific. The first question I asked that, okay, the share of Asia Pacific is 55%. What is the share of Asia Pacific in total population? Do you know what is the share of Asia Pacific in total population? 62%. 62% population having 55% is still less per capita figures. Whereas this looks to be very small. But the moment you bring in their population share, which is much less, the figures look very, very different. So this graph, which is, how come it went up? This graph, which is projected, said, don't bring in the denominator. Population growth is the major, don't bring that. You find out who is doing maximum use. And often the developing countries have argued that, look, average material consumption globally, what is the average figure? Average figure is 13 tons. In 1980, the average material consumption per capita was 8 tons. It has global average has gone to 13 tons. What is the figure for America? 38 tons. Most of the developed countries have 25, 30. What is the figure for India? Less than 3 tons. China has gone up suddenly, but most of the African countries have 1 ton. So the gap in per capita figures is very, very high between the developed and the developing world. This graph, in a way, is a misnomer. You are just showing the total figure without telling, you are telling 55% of the total material consumption is from Asia Pacific without telling that 62% of the population live here. Now, let's understand two different concepts. Sorry, I'm making a bit like a classroom lecture. One concept is domestic material consumption. And the data is available from the International Resource Panel of UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program. What is domestic material consumption? This is how much a country is consuming every year of the earth resources. Think about it. Earth has a stock of resources. How much India, how much America is extracting? So that is the direct materials that you extract from the earth. Plus, you are importing. You are not extracting from within your country, you are importing. That is the material footprint being exported outside. United States of America is using resources equal to 2 times its area. That is double of what is available within America. They are using that because they are able to, because of the market forces, because they are paying capacity, they are able to draw resources from other regions. That is the material footprint. But domestic resource consumption is how much resources you are using internally, how much you are importing. That is also your consumption because you are importing for your lifestyle protection. And if you are exporting, then that is to be subtracted. That is the domestic material consumption. Second is material footprint. Sorry, you don't have to feel diffident, but how many of you are from economics background? All of you, more or less. But nonetheless, it's not necessary that the non-economists would not appreciate this. The material footprint is calculated within input-output framework. You know, Suppose you are taking 100 tons of coal. You think, oh, we have used only 100 tons of coal. That's not true. In order to produce that 100 tons of coal, you need electricity, you need transport, you need other resources. So, how do you know that? In the first round, you take 100 tons, but to produce that, you have need electricity, you need some coal also in that process, some other transport costs. So, you've taken that input also. But in order to produce those inputs, you need again in the earlier round. So, you have a whole chain. And how do you calculate that total resources? It is not the directly what you're extracting, but in order to do that, you need whole multiplier linkages. And that is calculated. Most of you know about this. Not A matrix. A matrix is the technological coefficient matrix. It is I minus A inverse matrix. And would you believe IRP is using I minus A matrix in Sydney to calculate the direct and indirect input requirement. If you are taking, let's say, oil from Iraq or Iran, some billion gallons, it is not only that, in order to produce that oil, transport it to the border, and electricity consumption also has some requirements. So you have to adapt everything, and you find that material footprint tends to be higher than domestic consumption for the developed countries. For America, it is much higher. For Europe, it is higher. But for the less developed countries, their material footprint, because they are producing primary products for exports. So the moment you are exporting it, it is to be subtracted because material footprint is calculated on the basis of how much impact you are making. And if you are doing for export purposes, then India is exporting, suppose, food grains. So that impact is to be subtracted because it is not for internal use. So that is what we have to worry about, that what is the material impact. And you will see in the next graph, you see this is the difference between material footprint and domestic consumption. This is the gap. That means your material consumption is higher, material footprint is higher. Why it is higher? Because you are taking resources from other countries. And can you guess which region is this? This is Europe. Europe is getting much more material footprint than domestic consumption because they are getting the resources from others. So picture has changed completely. You look at this second. This is United North America. And look at these countries, Africa, Latin America, West Asia. There, the material footprint is low, domestic production is higher because they are producing and exporting it for the developed countries. And the gap has gone over time. As far as the developed countries are concerned, you look at that, their gap had gone up. That means they were in more and more sending their material footprint to outside the world. This is the stage for the Europe. This is the period for America. That means their material footprint, which is exported to the other regions, is much higher. But happily, there has been some change. It has gone down a little bit, but again, it is getting stabilized. For America, it is slightly showing an increase. This is also getting stable. No further decline after 2000. We are very happy that West has learned a lesson and they are bringing down their material footprint, which is exported to outside their country. It has stopped going, it has gone down with no recent improvement. Whereas most of the backward regions have higher domestic production and material footprint exported is much less, excepting this is an interesting development. This is again Asia Pacific and largely China. China's material consumption has gone up significantly. So you found that it was positive, higher material footprint than domestic requirement. It went down. Here in 2000, it was negative. That means your material footprint was less. But suddenly it went up. Basically, China, Indonesia, some of these countries which had high material footprint exported, but again it has started coming down. So basically, point I'm making is that developed countries had this opportunity of exporting, of sending out the material footprint to the other countries, which is not available to the less developed countries now. Now, this is the per capita figure. This is per capita material footprint. How do we calculate that? Material footprint per capita is total material footprint, which is within the country and outside the country. Suppose you have set up, a German industrialist has set up in Philippines, tree, and the output is coming to Germany. Of course, this is a material footprint which should be counted against Germany, because Philippines are only having some labor advantages, but nonetheless, the material footprint should be accounted for Germany. And taking that into consideration, which country is this? This is United States of America. This is per capita figure. As you find that it was in a way showing an increasing trend up to 2001, it came down, but again it has started going up slightly. This is Europe. Going up, it has started going down, but again it is getting stabilized. No more decline in per capita material footprint. And as far as the other less developed countries are concerned, the picture has reversed completely. You find they're all lying flat. The material footprint is less than 1 ton, less than 2 tons. India 2 to 3 tons. China is about 7, 8 tons now. Most of the West Asian countries have 3, 4 tons and not showing increase. This is true that the resource consumption is increasing mildly, but what we expect is that these two, North America and Europe, which have got significantly higher material footprint, there is not much of a decline which is coming up. Now, I'll go quickly because I would like to have some discussion at the end. What I did, Human Development Report classifies the countries into how many development categories? 4. The latest Human Development Report, HDR, classifies all the countries. They take 193 countries roughly. They put them into 4 categories: very high, medium, and low. And the classification is based on 2022 data. But what they have done is to give the data for these countries which belong to very high, medium, and low categories in 2022. The countries remain the same, but they give the data from 1980 onwards. So you see, this is the per capita material footprint, which means the total impact in terms of resources per person. This is for the very high development categories. It is much higher, as I said, something like 40 tons per capita. And as far as the medium and low are concerned, there is not much of a change. Those that belong to the low and medium category, they're lying more or less flat at 3 or 4 tons. But real change has occurred in the countries which are now in the high category. This is very high, medium, and low. I'm talking about UNDP's fourfold classification. So real change has occurred here. The countries which are presently in the high category, but in 1980 were in the low or medium category. There is a sharp increase, and this does not include India. India is not yet in the high category. India is in the medium category. So this includes Indonesia, Brazil, China, and some other countries. So there has to be some awareness in these countries which are emerging economies, which were at a low category, now has reached high category with regard to the conservation and better use of resources. I'll just put two more points and then I will open the floor for discussion. This is efficiency of resource use. You use 1 ton of resources, how much value do you get? This is what we have calculated in different countries. Because the idea, UN says, you should use 1 kilo of resources in America, you get a higher value. If you use it in India or Bangladesh, you get lower value because your technology is poor, your institutional structure, there's a corruption, there are all kinds of factors. So resources should be used in those countries where maximum benefits are coming. The argument that is being given that please improve the technology, improve the institutional arrangement in the less developed countries because there are equity concerns. So what we find is that the productivity of resources has gone up in Europe and North America because tertiary sector is emerging in a big way in Europe and America. Manufacturing sector is slightly declining. There's a thesis by, the Harvard professor Riggs. He says that there is premature deindustrialization. Danny Roderick, premature deindustrialization. So basically, what we find is that argument is that look at the efficiency of resource use in America and Europe. They are using 1 kilo and getting $1.5, whereas these less developed countries are using 1 kilo of resources and getting 23 cents, 25 cents. So argument is to the global institution, please improve the resource value in these countries through institutional transformation, technological transformation. This is how I wanted to find out what is the impact of increase in resource use. If there is increase in resource use, does it help the countries? Does it help in increasing the income? If you increase your per capita material consumption, does your income go up? Does your human development index go up? This is the question that I'm posing in this international project, that what happens if your per person material footprint increases? We find that the relationship is positive with income. That means if you increase your resources, your income level goes up. Whether you measure your income in dollars, American dollars, 2017 constant prices, or you measure in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity, as human development index does, you do find that there is a rationale. You can't keep on shouting, as once I heard Sunita Narayan. She was arguing, and she is a very forceful speaker at a global platform. We should get the American president by the neck and ask them to sign to bring down their per capita material footprint. Now, I have a feeling that when the American president says to the world and to Sunita Narayan or to me, that American lifestyle is not negotiable in any international platform. American lifestyle will be decided by America. You have no answer. You can't say morality, ethics, your past sins. That young girl told me that, sorry, my grandfather is not responsible and I am certainly not responsible. So, what I tried to argue that even in pure economic terms, it is not desirable for the developed countries to increase their material footprint. And that is what would be more acceptable. Not a normative lecture, lecture on what you should do for the globe and for the poor countries. Nobody listens to that. This world is full of political bargainers. They would say, sorry, We don't want to listen to this moral lecture. What we are doing in this project, and in a study I have earlier shown, that increase in the material consumption per capita increases income, all right, but it doesn't translate into human development. And look at this curve. You clearly see this linear fit is not there. The countries which are at a high level of material consumption, the material consumption is not resulting in improvement in human development, and human development is measured in income, health, and education. So that is the argument that we are trying to give to UNEP, that do not give moral lectures that the developed countries must do this for caring the poorer countries. We should tell them that your present pattern of resource consumption is not helping you in improving your quality of human development. Yes, income to some extent, yes. Even for the poorer countries, material consumption increases means income level goes up, but it does not translate into improvement in human development. This is the correlation matrix. I think I have taken a little more time in explaining it, but I hope the basic ideas are sinking in so that you can ask me the questions. What I did, I took 193 countries, put them into 4 categories. The categories are very high, high, medium, and low. And I asked this question. We asked this question that if in very high category per capita material footprint goes up, that means per capita resource use goes up, direct and indirect together, does it mean higher income? Yes, to some extent. But does it mean higher human development? No, it doesn't. Does it mean higher health index? It doesn't. Does it mean higher index for education? It does. So basically, your higher material consumption improves your economic well-being, okay, but it worsens in some situations your health and educational impact. Then I ask this question. By the way, if you look at inequality, all of you must have looked at the Human Development Report of UNDP. They are measuring human development from 1990 onwards. But in 2010, there was a significant change that UNDP introduced. What is that? They started adjusting human development for inequality. You have seen that? Inequality adjusted human development index, which means if two countries have the same level of human development, let's say 0.8, but the country which has higher inequality will get a lower score because you discount your overall human development by inequality. So you adjust for the inequality. So what I found out is that higher the level of development of the country in the very high category, inequality in health and education is less. Whereas in the poorer countries, in the less developed countries, you find inequality is very high. Generally, you should expect the opposite, that inequality should be high in America, in North America, in European countries. Inequality in education and health in Europe is much less than in India. In India, inequality is 40%. Imagine, whereas in Europe, I mean, many of my friends, they say, my children go to the same school as my bus drivers. It depends on the location, which school. Whereas here in India, the schooling is the basic thing. And my children go to a very different school than the supporting staff. So inequality in education and health is not a matter of development only. And by increasing the resource use, you are not in a position to reduce inequality also. So the whole regression analysis, correlation analysis, I'm showing that forget about the moralistic arguments, but purely from economic point of view, improvement increase in the material consumption per capita does not result in improvement in human development, does not imply improvement in health and education, does not improve inequality also. Inequality. And then I ran regression with increase in the material footprint. One is level of material footprint, second is improvement in material footprint. And the second one, improvement in material footprint, does not show any positive impact, which means we can make a strong argument that the countries at a higher end of development are not improving their social and human development impact by increasing their material footprint, whereas for the less developed country there is still some rationale for it. So the basic question is, are we able to transform economic well-being into social well-being, into human development? And that brings me to the last segment of my argument, that we cannot measure resource efficiency only through income. I showed you the graph of resource efficiency. At the top was North America, second was Europe, because you took income and divided by the resources in a limited manner. It's a very important study by Heckel. So, sorry, these are the four correlation matrices for very high, for medium, and for low. And then I showed inequality across the countries, basically to make the point that increase in material footprint is not resulting in improvement in human development, neither health and education, excepting income, and inequality also is getting worsened with this. This is Hickel, Jason, University of London. I really like this study, and I would like some young scholars here should look at this and see how they make a departure from the UN system of measurement to make the point. They said, do not take only GDP divided by material consumption. That is very limited. In the numerator, you take GDP plus educational impact. Of course, you say educational expenditure is also part of GDP, but there are many benefits of education which doesn't get reflected in the expenditure. So this methodology which they have worked out, and they're giving the data from 1990 onwards. They're getting the data from 1990 onwards till 2024 and showing how human development efficiency are varying across the different countries. So in the numerator, they take education, health, and income. In the denominator, they take air quality, water quality, and material consumption. Everything added up by some method. There are some valuation. You have to put them into some standard denominator. And that is the graph that I want to show. And I would like to end my presentation with that. And that really provokes very interesting ideas. Just have patience for another 2 minutes. Just see this interesting analysis which has been done. And I am not saying that this methodology is foolproof. How you measure education, health, add it up, how you take water, air pollution also in the denominator. In the numerator, the overall well-being, social and economic well-being. In the denominator, overall resource cost. Have you seen development curves, development related indicators where India is above America, India is above Australia or Europe? Generally, India is above developed countries in hunger index, in gender discrimination index. We are pretty high. Infant mortality rate is pretty high. But this is a graph. Look at this. At the top is Sri Lanka. By the way, it is not at the top at the Sri Lanka. I have just taken out only South Asian countries. In the top, I think, which country was in from East European country, but Sri Lanka's rank is 27th. top in Asia. Next is India. Third, Bangladesh. Pakistan is also not much behind. China. China, you find China's line, it was improving. Number, it was above India, but it has now come down. Why it has come down? China's ranking, I've been telling you, the material intensive industrialization in China is responsible for the China's curve. You see, this is China. This is India. And as I said, out of 193 countries, I've just selected the countries. Canada, United States of America are way below us, which is total value of the outcome produced through income, education, and health divided by total resources consumed. We have to study their methodology since it's being globally talked about. I think it's very important that we pay attention to it. So basically, it is saying that as far as the resource efficiency is concerned, in terms of overall well being, many of the Asian countries are not doing badly. Now, you might say, oh, Africa is also will be that because they are not having much electricity resources. This is not true. Many of the African countries are not at the top because although their resource use is less, their income outcome is also very low. Education outcome is also very low. So many of the African countries are much below Asia. Some of the Asian countries are from the top. What about China? China is above us. China is fourth category. You see that yellow color? This is, sorry, this is not very clear. The Whereas you look at Australia, United States of America, Canada being in the worst category. China is better than us. Many of the African countries are in the second, third category. Latin America also in the second, third category. Now, hold your breath and look at this. 1901, 92, 93, 94, 97, 2000. Colors are changing. I'm sorry you are not able to see the change in the color. It's shaking. Look at now. 2019, that's the latest I have. India's position has improved to second category. China's position has gone down. It has gone down to fifth category. Australia, Canada remains the same. There are changes in many of the African countries. They have become better over time. Now, this really gives a message that the institutional structure, the governance system, settlement structure, the concentration of urban population in large cities, that is also responsible for higher energy consumption. In India, you know that 2011 census identifies 3,000 small towns, and the per capita energy consumption in small and medium towns is much less. Of course, quality has to go up. So I'm basically saying that one has to focus on institutional, technological, and governance factors in order to maximize resource efficiency and improve sustainability. This is the last slide. At the top, there is a circle. This is United States of America. And this is measuring resource use. India and China both are within their country's limit. If you This is the limit of their own country, and your consumption of resources is within your national boundaries. You're not consuming more resources than what is available within your country. And what about America? Using much, 5 times more resources, and these are the European countries. So we felt in 1990 we are in a reasonably good situation. But look at this, what is happening over time. Again, this data is available. You just go to internet and Google for sustainability. You will get this graph. You see what's happening? China has gone up much above their country's resource availability. India is still at that level, but it went down a little bit but remains very high. This is the situation. If you measure outcome in terms of overall human development and have some methodology of
some methodology of quantifying the social benefits. I started by saying that environmental economics was more matter of faith, convictions, argument, your political disposition. But I think we need to really quantify. I'm not saying the UN system is totally wrong or the University of London's Hickels thing, which they are putting up every year, one-way problems, and then perhaps improve and give the alternate results. I have seen two or three other studies which make some departure from London University's methodology, but still come to the conclusion that sustainability performance of the many of the less developed countries is much higher than the developed countries. So I give this challenge to the young students and teachers here. When the teachers are much younger than me, so they have the responsibility. I just, with my limited resources, I put forward some graphs and raise some questions. I hope you'll be able to take them forward. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Professor. It was a fascinating lecture. I think students also must have enjoyed it. Can we take a few questions? I have some questions, but I'll ask it later. Students want to raise something, so we will. You need a mic? Brief and pinpointed. Don't.
Please give your name and
So, good afternoon, sir. My name is Ram. I'm a PhD scholar from the School of Economics. My broad area of interest is environmental economics. And I'd like to thank you for your illustration of this dynamics between the material footprint and domestic material consumption, also across the various HDI categories, as you said. My question is, may I know your view on how this entire dynamics between material footprint, domestic material consumption across the state categories, is there any way that it might change in future due to this upcoming just transition, where the focus is not just on moving towards environmentally sustainable energy, but you're also taking society into view, and within that, especially the people who are involved in fossil fuel extraction. Yes.
thank you. Maybe we can take go for that. Pick my pen. Yeah, it's there. Good. I've already explained it by different ways properly. I didn't want to take more resources. Okay.
So, yeah, question is known to Professor. So, I'm coming from School of Economics, Master Second Year student. So, my question is, environmental inequality happens at multiple levels. Obviously, the first one is that we talk about in terms of the carbon emission, but it also happens through the lens of gender, caste and race, and also in terms of access to natural resources. We had a study, in Gujarat. The impact of climate change, obviously, we could see in terms of natural disasters. And we just see one areas which are floods. The people are more vulnerable to the disaster because it's one for various cultural reasons. When it comes to drought, they are the negative affecting most because they happen a lot. And now that basically the positive correlation between material footprint and income, and also there is correlation between carbon emissions and the income. This is important also. So we could use wealth tax as an instrument to mitigate that inequality. When it comes to the inequality with the other means, we couldn't certainly address through that one. The second question is, sir, the one that you and me talked about, so the wealth tax that is happening within the sovereigns. But the inequality that we are seeing is broadly between the first world and the third world. So, consensus among the nations because the taxation could only happen within a sovereign. Sorry. So my name is Mithun from MA Anthropology first year. My question is when we talk about unequal environmental burden, we majorly focus on state centric. Then we, to equalize this burden, we got this differentiated responsibilities. If we look within the state, if we bring this principle within the state of differentiated responsibilities within the state, like various classes or various sections of society, then it translates into better HDA development. That's my question.
Sir, I'm Energy Economics is new. I'm Santosh from MA Economics second year. Energy Economics is a new field for me, so it may be a basic question. But so when we talk of resource consumption, the government larger level can control how much minerals are mined or how uh, how electricity is produced. But the ultimate consumption remains at the user level, right? The number of electricity that people consume, that the government cannot control that you should consume only so much, or even machineries. Government can control how much machines can be, how much iron ore can be. But if more industries want to, more people want to set up more factories, they want to use more materials. We can't stop them, right? So how does the macro, like the government is talking of zero emission, I understand because how we produce is there, but otherwise the consumption at micro level, how can government control that basically?
Last question, because we can go to this next round. Now we can. Anything else?
Sir, I'm Pragya from School of Economics. Your research shows that increase in resource use is increasing income, but not human capital. But now, as they are advocating circular economy, they are advocating about less energy and resource use. So, how you will predict how that will affect income and human capital?
Okay. The next round. Let's see. I can respond. The question that's important is like, that how do you measure? You see, I told in 1980, material footprint was higher than domestic consumption, which means, and it increased till 2001, 2002, that the developed countries were able to draw resources from other countries, right? But after 2000, for one decade, there was rapid industrialization in many of the developing developed countries. That's why their export of raw materials became less and their own use of resources increased. And that was the period where the less developed countries increased their domestic consumption and domestic production also. And subsequent to that, and during that period of 2000 to 2010, the material footprint of the developed countries like Europe and North America, Canada, Australia, that went down. But after 2010, you find that again this clamor, my lifestyle is not negotiable. America says that, Australia says that, Canada says that. Look, we are independent country, sovereign country. Our sovereignty should not be compromised. So we should have right to buy resources by our affordability. I remember at Jawaharlal Nehru University, one professor came from Japan and he was very confidently arguing that your infant mortality rate at that time was something like 60 per thousand children. And well, he said this is on the much lower side. Whereas in Japan, it is 7. It is still on the higher side. Why? Because we have higher affordability. We can give, better neonatal, antenatal care. So 7 is too high for us. 50 is okay for you. Now, which really means that your life-saving variables are dependent on your affordability, which is not acceptable with the human development framework. So what you are asking, that would the methods of measurement change? That is an issue. I must tell you, as I was reviewing for my study, it's not my study, frankly. It is the development alternative study. I'm just an advisor. Uh, you know, there was one paper I came across. This is showing for Vienna different methods of calculating material footprint and calculating domestic consumption. And five of them give one result, one of them give different result. So methodology is important. If the UN is measuring resource efficiency by dividing GDP by the total material use, and London University is measuring by taking numerator, adding many things in the denominator, also they're adding something. This is the methodological issue. And I have a feeling the debate should be really on these issues, and these are resolvable. I don't think this is a total politics. Politics will always remain. So I think there is a need for better assessment of benefit and cost of the resources so that we can give sensible decision. The second point, if I recall rightly, was about inequality. Inequality we have analyzed here in my presentation across regions. Across regions means North America, Europe, West Asia, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and also very high, medium, low development countries. We have looked at inequality across regions, but UNDP gives inequality within the country. 2010 onwards, you get the educational inequality in India, educational inequality in health in Brazil. So within the country, inequality. And what we showed that increase in the resource use and increase in the income does not affect your inequality. And inequality, then we are talking in terms of the vulnerable population, women, people in the rural areas, children. But you'd say, oh, you didn't talk about them. Yes, indeed. I talked about the macro framework of our study, which is the first chapter. The second, third chapter are exactly doing this. For example, palm oil is coming up as an alternative to energy globally. Malaysia, many other countries are doing. What is the effect on women? What is the effect on the poorer sections of the population? There's one way of resource efficiency increase is aggregation. Aggregation means your carpooling system, that you don't need a car to be driven long way to get a passenger. There is a system of aggregation, Ola, Uber, that is one. But what is the impact on unemployment? Similarly, food. There are aggregators. There are many small little places and you can get your food from anywhere. But what is the impact of this aggregation on women's employment? So these are the concerns that we have in the second, third, fourth, fifth chapters in our UNF study, wherein we are trying to find out how the vulnerable sections of the population, ethnic population, the woman, the rural population, if there is a caste factor, how are they going to be affected by those measures which are supposed to increase resource efficiency? So I think that is extremely important, that we don't only talk about resource efficiency increase, but how it is going to impact different segments of population. And there you're absolutely right that a limited view that we are able to take from the macro data on the inequality across regions or across countries or within the countries is not enough. You have to go to further disaggregation. The final question I think is that how do you really translate this into the micro level? You have these concerns of reducing inequality at the national level, the global level. But how do you translate it? How the government or any governance system translates these macro objectives to the ground level? That's an important issue. But I really don't think that is that difficult. I was sharing the Swachh Bharat mission. Frankly, the government doesn't trust me to put in policy making capacity. Rao Saab of the Vice Chancellors have said that, well, Professor Kundu has, I think it is allowed to influence government policy significantly. I was once giving a television interview and I said I chaired this committee and did that, and government didn't accept it. So the field was blunt in asking me, Professor Kundu, you chair so many committees, they don't listen to you. Why do you accept chairmanship? This is a valid question. And why do I? And many of the suggestions that I gave, not necessarily. So they really put me in the measurement side. So what I would still say, housing for all is a major program of the government of India, right? And when you're sanctioning housing for all component has four verticals. One is self-financing, slum upgradation, so CLSS, which is credit linked subsidy scheme. In all the four verticals, government is playing a significant role. You're giving massive subsidy. Even if you're constructing yourself, you take the sanction and you get something as a loan at 3%, 4%. There could be an obligation that your energy use should be minimum. Your building material should be like this. Your angularity with the wind should be like this. It was not that difficult. 11 million houses have been built in the urban areas within a period of 5 years. You could have easily injected the environmental concern. Similarly, Jal Jeevan Mission, which is going on now, providing water, then water conservation as a part of the subsidy which is being given. Government is a major playing. I think if there are seriousness, you should be in a position to influence these major programs through that influence the household level decisions, village level decisions in a significant manner. I thought that should be possible. Yes. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Kishan and I'm doing PhD in economics. So my question is, as Professor J Rao also said that we are going to be a net zero, and I think the year is 2070. But as your study shows that once, as we are having a this consumption of this carbon, and our income is directly related to positively related to the consumption. If we are going to a net zero till 2070, if it is possible, what are the alternatives that we are focusing on? So that our per capita income will be like not goes down as per the your study, as you showed the positive relationship between the carbon usage and the per capita income. That is my question. Thank you for that lecture, sir. It was quite stimulating, and so I have a question which is methodological in a sense that we seem to be trying to reconcile three different goalposts. One is, of course, the material consumption itself, which is being discussed and analyzed in efficiency terms. The other seems to be the human development indices, which is a distributional concern, perhaps. It's about access, inclusive development, or things like that. A third is the ecological impact assessment, which is altogether requires very different set of indicators. Now, what is the vantage point from which we are forging a critique? If we say that the distribution is a problem, then it need not necessarily reconcile into reducing the material consumption. It might actually imply then that you need corrections to your institutions so as to make your consumption more equal, perhaps, so that everybody can enjoy this, the benefits of materiality, which does not really reconcile or address the problem of ecological impact. So in that sense, how do we really, because the circularity notion and also in the context in which we are really discussing this, broadly the global neoliberal model itself being driven by the efficiency concerns, the marginalist imaginations, how do we reconcile that with the circularity, kind of a thing which, context where you're talking about the commodity life cycles shrinking? How do you really ensure that this really happens? Because the efficiency levels, it's so competitive that you can't really do that and reconcile with the kind of developmental model that we have. So how do we really address these concerns? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My name is Jajati. A very exciting lecture. My question is slightly different. During your lecture, you cited Danny Roddick, the concept of premature deindustrialization. What is your take on that in case of India? Whether we are deindustrializing or what is your take on that?
Good afternoon, sir. I am Harsh from School of Economics PhD student. India is a developing country, sir. We are shifting from fossil fuel to electric vehicles, but our income is very less compared to different countries. We are developing nation. What is the effectiveness of electric vehicle and what is means take of India on electric vehicles? So this is a sustainable things or not?
Yeah, I have an the picture first in mind. A student asked you saying that intergenerational question, my father, grandfather did something, am I answerable? In a sense, it's an intergenerational question being raised. Is the answer that is being given is saying that if income increases, inequality increases, and so on versa. As an individual, why should I bother about anyone if I'm put it rationally? I'll say I'm bothered about my income. So, are we moving from one part, which is an intergenerational question, to another part which says that your income is and your HDI index are correlated? So, are we moving in, bringing in another part which a person might say, I'm not interested? So, I'm just trying to say, how do you react to it? Yeah,
Let me begin with this. One argument that we can give purely normative argument that look, it's true that we live in one world. Oh, there was an American song, "We are in the same boat, brother." If you sink one end, it will sink the other. That was the kind of song, which is true that we are in an interdependent world. And if you say that let the developing world has the global average of 13 tons per capita per year, 13 tons multiplied by 1400 million Indians and another 1400 million Chinese and Indonesians and Brazilians, the world is bound to collapse. It is not possible that we first allow all the developing countries to come to the average level and then we think of equity. You have to, India has to bother about your increasing. You can't say, oh, let me first meet all the other sustainable development goals of poverty, hunger, educational deficit, health deficit, and then we will think of bringing down the material consumption. That has to start. But certainly India should show the commitment towards sustainability right in its developmental program. That's why I said housing, water, mission should reflect that. But I certainly would protest if somebody says your taxation policy should be decided by international agency. No, no country allows. We would deliberate ourselves to see how the rich people who are having $40,000 per capita per, their certainly then tax should go up. But you remember at the time of the election, I'm talking about general election, somebody talked about wealth tax. And there's a huge outcry. Say, oh, they are going to take out your money, and people had to withdraw. Like Sam Petroda, I think, raised this issue that how about wealth tax? Wealth tax is a very legitimate issue to discuss at least. So I have a feeling that it is our responsibility to take measures. And the point that you came is that there are different things, production and distribution. I don't think they are different. Once you have decided your production structure, you have already created an inequality. You can't, after saying this is how we are going to produce, this will be the production system, you can't redistribute. Your production system has to reflect that redistribution. Once you separate that, it is not possible. So your resource efficiency measures that you have to address the issue of inequality, because you can't say, oh, let us first focus on resource efficiency, maximize the resource efficiency, then we'll try to subsidize the poor in some manner. No, the technology for resource efficiency, and that's why we have taken 5 or 6 major initiatives on maximizing resource efficiency and saying these measures globally, are they affecting the poor and vulnerable much worse? Because we cannot just say that go for resource efficiency without bothering about the impact on the income distribution. So that is the issue I was trying to argue, that instead of saying, Vijay, that well, the normative point is that your grandfather did it, so what about me? Why should I be punished? You make a moral argument. Instead of doing that, it is much better for me to tell that young lady from Germany that, your present policies of pushing up income in Germany through higher resource use, whether you take it from internal sources or outside sources, is not really helping your overall social well-being. That, to my mind, is much more compelling reason. Because in the present world of global tough competition, nobody is going to listen to your moral prescriptions. And to say, look, per capita figures, we are much less. He said, who bothers about per capita figures? If you have produced large number of children, it's not, now you have to suffer the consequences. But what we are arguing in this paper is population is a major problem for Asia Pacific. Population growth rate is pretty high in Africa also. But do you know by which year the global population will stabilize? The global population is not going to increase indefinitely. When will the global population stabilize? Anybody has any idea? UN says that the global population will stabilize by 2063, 64, right? That's the time when the global population will stabilize. Whereas Lancet, and they use a much more rigorous methodology, they said that the global population will stabilize before 2060, by 2055. India's population, they are predicting to stabilize by 2048. Earlier it said India's population will continue to grow till 2065. So we will tell the developed world that third world countries have done tremendous job in controlling its population. And population is a major factor in resource use. Asia has done tremendously well in population control. Not only India. India's TFR has gone down below 2.1. There are many other countries. They have done wonderful jobs. So you can't blaming these third world countries. You remember they said one of the major problem of the world is that Indians and Chinese have started eating 2 meals a day. So if you eat 2 meals a day, obviously you create environmental problems. In that we have controlled our population. We have slowed down our rate of urbanization also. We are creating small and medium towns. So I have a feeling we have done that, and it is for the developed countries to realize that increased resource consumption is not helping in sustainable development. And that's what all my statistical analysis, the correlation and regression, is to show that in none of the four groups, we have taken four groups, in none of the groups you do find that increase the high level of material consumption and increase in that level of consumption have any positive impact on human development indicators. It has some positive impact on income only, but all other aspects of human development do not manifest that kind of a positive relationship. So one has to rethink about just reach by using more and more resources. Even already the UN methodology already says that if your income is more than $40,000 per year, if it is $45,000, it is considered to be equal to 40,000 only, because 40,000 is considered to be good enough for improving well-being, and $45,000 per year may bring down your well-being because you may start using drugs and all kinds of other things. So 40,000 is considered to be the maximum that one can usefully spend. So income growth is not the only thing. But there was a friend of mine in Economics Center in Jawaharlal Nehru University. He used to say, you should apply that also for aging. After 90, it is not worth living. So whether a country has 95 or 90, it should be considered to be the same. I could have agreed with that when I was 50, but now that I'm approaching 90, it is difficult for me to accept that proposition that living 95 years. He says living 95 years means more heart problems, liver problems, kidney problems, and to increase life expectancy by 1 year after 80 is very expensive for different countries. So he was pleading that there should be some upper limit for aging and some upper limit for education also, because very high level of education creates more disputes, unhappiness. You see, but I think it is Plato who said that an dissatisfied academic is better than a satisfied pig. So and much of the gender issue, gender related unhappiness has come because of awareness. I know Amartya Sen was a member of that committee which Sarkozy, the French president, constituted on human development. And he said, and the level of satisfaction should be taken as the index of happiness. Amartya Sen argued that satisfaction can come out of ignorance. You don't, if the women are told that it's all right to be slapped once in 6 months, and the data from uh, internal IIPS, the NFHS data show that 35% of the women think that they were beaten by their spouses for good reasons. What was the good reason? I did not prepare the food properly. I did not respect my father in law. And the women themselves report, yes, it happened, but it is my fault. So, what Amartya Sen was arguing in that committee for measuring human development is that satisfaction of the individual is not the thing, because dissatisfaction comes out of knowledge. So, if there is more conflict, more cases being reported of gender violence, does not mean though we are not progressing. The level of satisfaction can be achieved through ignorance by telling these are the norms and values. SC/ST population must follow this, and that is ideal, and people accept it. Then obviously satisfaction level goes up. Satisfaction and development may be different things, and that's what. Well, Amartya Sen, when he was lecturing, I was privileged to be his student for some time at Delhi School of Economics. I was very impressed by that argument that satisfaction and well-being could be revealed satisfaction could be very, very different things. Any other question? I hope. I know I have answered some of them partially, but the questions were so important. I'm sure I've tried to skip some of the difficult questions because I don't have the answer myself. We have to all think together. And I thought this young group of people I'll motivate in taking up the methodological issues. My first point was we should rescue environmental economics from theology and from normative exhortation. Now we must do this, we must do that. No, we tell them if you do this, these are the economic consequences, these are social consequences. Right? One of the bad things about COVID was the gender violence went up because the husband were hanging around within the house. They are not used to it. So there were more of tensions, more of domestic violence reported. But there's one good point about COVID. That sex ratio went improved. Female male ratio for all the deliveries during COVID period reports more girl child being born. Then tell me what could be the reason? How come COVID virus changes the sex ratio of the newborn? Can anyone guess? That I'm giving you the actual data. The childbirth that took place during the COVID period, 2020 to 2001. Take the number of female child born during this period and the number of female child born before that. Pardon me? Absolutely. People were scared to go to hospitals, so they did this. The whatever child comes is good enough not to go to the hospital testing. You might get COVID. So COVID increased ignorance about the gender of the child. So that is a better thing from not knowing the gender of the child. So knowledge is not necessarily, you know, improving your happiness. you know, so I think this not getting the knowledge about gender of the child improved. You look at district level data for Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, I've looked at it. The districts which do not have medical facilities have better sex ratio, female male ratio. The moment you have medical facilities, automatically comes the gender testing. And no matter how much policing you do, you have some relative, some doctor who says, I will not tell you directly, there are indirect ways of giving you a hint if there's a boy or a girl. An abortion in India is very easy. Least restrictive, you can give no reason, not even income a reason that I'm poor, I cannot support a third child. And the woman says, I don't want a child, that's good enough. You can have abortion. In most of the countries, the abortion is illegal unless there is a threat to the life of the mother, which is exceeding 70%. That lady in Ireland died because there was risk to the mother of the child, but risk was not more than 50%. So they said, no, 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 we'll try to save both child and the mother. In India, if the husband says, sorry, my wife's life is more important, I don't care about the child, then we'll have to listen to that. So ours is the most liberal country as far as the abortion laws are concerned. So the knowledge itself, the moment medical facilities reach there in Madhya Pradesh, I check, most backward district, tribal district have very high female male ratio. Go to the cities, female male ratio goes down. Availability of medical facilities allow people to choose the gender of the child like you choose the television set. Which television do you want? So similarly, whether you want a boy or a girl, that is facilitated by the ex- extension of medical facilities. Well, so thank you. Thank you very much. We have immediate for lunch. So anyone has any more queries? So thanks.
Your expertise and perspective have greatly enriched our understanding. I kindly request our Dean, Professor R. Vijay Sir, to felicitate Professor Kundu with a token of appreciation in recognition of his valuable contribution. Thank you, sir.
Also, I think that the program that features a lot of text.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Pragya, stand here today on behalf of our school to express our heartfelt thanks to all those who made this event possible. I'd like to start by thanking our Vice Chancellor, Professor J Rao, who has always been supportive of our initiatives and encouraged us to strive for excellence. I thank Professor Amitabh Kundu for his very insightful lecture. Sir, your lecture not only gave us knowledge, but I hope all of you agree that it taught us how to look at the same problem from a very different perspective. Thank you, sir. I also thank the IOE Directorate, IOE Director Professor M. Ghanshyam and his staff for their support. I thank our PRO and his office for dissemination of this lecture. Um, I also thank our dean for taking all the initiative for organizing this event. I thank my faculty colleague and our school office staff who always played the role of a backbone to us and help us in the organization of this talk. I'd like to express my appreciation for all our guests who has been taken time from their busy schedule to grace this occasion with their presence. Finally, I would like to thank each and every one of you, our dear students. Your presence has added spark to this event. I would like to mention that and made it more special. Thank you, each and every one of you. I'd like to request all of you to join us for lunch now and also join the afternoon session where we'll have the alumni meet at 2:30. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. बोल डाटा ट्रांसफर नहीं करता है ये वाला कहाँ गया वो इसका बॉक्स का है चलो खाना खा के आओ अभी कार्ड रीडर क्या करो खाना खा खत्म हो जाएगा हमको पहले भी आना है स्टूडेंट्स उसके बाद आ जाएंगे खाना खा के हमको पहले आना है सेट करने के लिए फिर से वेट करेंगे तो वो खा के इधर आ जाएंगे सब कल देंगे शाम को देंगे दे देंगे शाम को दे देंगे फोटोज करेंगे बैकअप इस छोटा वाला जो बैग है उसमें
Emerging global scenario of resource use. Amitabh Kundu. क्या रिकॉर्ड करो सेंट्रल सेंट्रल और साइड वाला हो रहा है हो गया ऑन ही स्टार्ट से कुछ लाइव వాయిస్ అదే మధ్యలో వాడు కూర్చున్నాడు కూర్చోండి కదా తీసినప్పుడు కూర్చుంటే మైక్ పక్కన పెట్టేసాడు అది మనం పక్కన రావట్లేదు అదే లైక్ ఫౌండేషన్ స్కూల్ కదా ఇలా అప్పుడే ఎడ్యుకేషన్ ఫోటోస్ ట్రాన్స్ఫర్ చేసినట్టు దానికి పోవాలి స్టూడెంట్సే కదా हो गया बहुत अच्छा खाना खाते हैं अरे यार
हाँ होल्डिंग मॉडिफायर रखा है रूम में रखने के बाद भी कैमरा खराब हो जाता है उसको फिर सर्विस कराने जाना पड़ा है माइक्रोफोन उसमें डस्ट आता है तो ब्लॉकिंग होता है सर माइक्रोफोन चेंज किया माइक्रोफोन चेंज किया कहाँ से वो कहाँ जाएगा उसका निकाल के रहेगा क्यों नहीं तो आएगा तो तेरे जैसा मेरा ही बेटा है ब्रो कल मिलते हैं ब्रो कल पूरा फ्लोर प्लान करते हैं हाँ उसमें आठ तक खाना करना एक रिकॉर्ड करना हरी से बात कर लेना मेरे करेगा मतलब वो वर्क क्या करेगा क्योंकि फोटो कितने लोग फोटोग्राफी करेंगे मेरे का भी बोला भाई मतलब मैं बोल रहा हूँ सारे लोग फोटोग्राफी में इंटरेस्टेड है ना कितने फोटोग्राफर को केवल दो ही फोटोग्राफर पड़े कुछ एडिटिंग में कुछ इधर उधर जाना इससे बोला था कल अरे हमसे तो मीटिंग में उससे केवल बड़ी को फिल्म डालते हैं पिछली बार बाला हुआ, इस बार ये हुआ, इस बार ये हुआ। बाला 2 साल पहले गया था यूनिवर्सिटी में, कैंडिडेट हो गया प्रेसिडेंट का। इसलिए क्योंकि तेलुगु सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं सब ऐसे। और यूनिट मीटिंग नहीं हुआ कि कौन प्रेसिडेंट बनेगा। बाला और ये आपस में डिसाइड करके कर दिए सब, बाला सोनी को साक्षी होने में। और मतलब होता तो कोई नहीं है ऐसे, कहीं इधर उधर तो कहीं भी नहीं होता है। ईवीपी में होता था पहले, लेकिन मतलब पिछले साल इसके पहले कोई दिल्ली से था। मतलब ये लोग 2 लोगों को चूज कर जाते थे, दिल्ली वाला एक किसी को चूज कर, जब नहीं है से करते हैं। इस बार कुछ नहीं है। फ्रंट हो गए, बैक और फ्रंट चेंज करना पड़ा, क्या और छोटा करना। भाई साहब कितना छोटा करूँ मैं उसको, पूरा पीछे कर दिया। तो उसको कर भी वैसे प्रिंट करो, नहीं होता है। इतना तो छोटा किया हूँ, ये देख लो, इतना स्पेस है इधर, इतना स्पेस है इधर। बोल भी इधर से आलू कटवा तो कटता है। ये गुस्सा है कि मैंने कंटेस्ट क्यों नहीं करने दे रहा है सर। जितने भी इधर वाले थे, नॉर्थ वाले, उसको आकाश वाटे पूरा सीआईएस का सपोर्ट है। अब चलो, फायर बैक करते हैं सर, जहाँ ही मौका मिलेगा। इसके बाद कौन बोलने वाला है? भेजो। क्या है सब्जेक्ट, क्या है इसका मेल का? स्कूल ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स फाउंडेशन लेक्चर तो एक ही तो है केवल। कहाँ है इल्यूमिनेट? हाँ। कृष्णा रेड्डी चेट्टी नो। पीडीएफ में क्यों देते हैं यार? खाना खा रहे हैं। एलुमिनाई लेक्चर सीरीज है। हो गया एलुमिनाई। एक सेकंड। इधर नहीं हो रहा है। हे भगवान। चलो 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 उधर चलो। उधर से माइक निकाल के लेके आओ। क्या? लाइव करना है कि नहीं करना है? हाँ? क्या? नहीं करते हैं।